Thank you for being here. It's a brisk, what is it, 80 degrees outside? It is February. That's right. Thank you for getting up early. This is the Ethics Committee of the Senate. We will convene the meeting at this time. Going to ask Senator Robertson if he would please open with a word of prayer. 50.
If you're comfortable bowing your heads, please do. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you, Lord God, this morning, understanding that we are your humble servants and that the responsibility we have here, Lord God, is greater than us, bigger than us, and much more important than us. Lord, I ask today that you'll bless us with the wisdom and the compassion necessary to remember all of the lives that depend on us to make those decisions, Lord God, in earnest and thought, focused, Lord God, on you and your Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We ask, Lord God, that you'll bless us today, keep our eyes open and our hearts open. We ask these things in your precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Senator. We have a very full agenda this morning, and I want to first thank you for being here, the committee members for being here early. We'll do one adjustment to the agenda. We're going to add one bill, Senate Bill 229. If I can have the staff pass that out. It's a one-page bill from Senator Beach, and that will be heard later today. Just quick ground rules. We have now 5 bills on the agenda this morning. This will be for hearing only. We will take no action this morning. We will allow the authors to present the legislation and the committee to question the authors. We will entertain one additional input from the Secretary of State's office after one bill. And then at the end of the presentations, we will entertain input from those of you who joined us this morning. So if you look at the agenda, the first item on the agenda is the approval of one additional caucus. It's in your folder. This is the Senate Taiwan USA Relations Caucus. We need to approve that so that they can be appropriately documented. I need a motion to approve the Senate Taiwan USA Relations Caucus. So move, Mr. Hatchett. Second from Senator Williams. All those in favor indicate with the uplifted hand. Any opposed? Thank you. It's unanimous. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask the Vice Chairman, Senator Williams, if he will assume the chair, and I will come down and present some legislation for the committee. And I'll be joined hopefully by Senator Beach and Senator Kirkpatrick as we move through their bill. So if you would please, Senator Williams, assume the chair.
Yes, sir. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Chairman, if you will, go ahead with your Senate Bill 189.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, we have a number of pieces of legislation I'd like to share with you this morning. The first bill is Senate Bill 189. We're working from LC 472048. When I assumed responsibility for chairing ethics and knew that elections would be a part of that responsibility, I made 3 commitments. Number 1, every legal vote counts. Period. Every legal vote counts. Number 2, every county follows Georgia law. Every county follows Georgia law. And number 3, every voter has confidence. Every voter has confidence that their vote counted, that their vote was tabulated correctly, it was counted correctly, it was secure. So Senate Bill 189's intent is to enhance voter confidence. What this bill does is it requires that the ballot itself be scanned and that not the current QR code. So if you look with me, at lines 12, the text portion of the paper ballot marked and printed by the electronic ballot marker indicating the elector's selection shall constitute the official ballot. And it will constitute the official ballot for voter tabulation. The official tabulation count on line 16, the official tabulation count on line 16 of any ballot scanner shall be based upon the text portion of such ballots, not any machine readable code. So the voter votes, they know how they voted, and their vote is directly scanned. That's the straightforward, simple explanation. We have three bills that I would consider one issue bills. This is the first. Are there any questions from the committee?
Let's see, who's number 15? Senator Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Burns, currently the scanning occurs how? On the QR code?
That's my current understanding. So I have a ballot marking machine where I create my ballot. It is then printed off the ballot marking machine. And then that printed ballot is taken to a tabulation scanner and it is scanned. But the scanning itself is not of the ballot that was printed. It is of the QR code that is printed on the ballot. So as a voter, can't read the code. I can read the ballot.
That's correct. Are you aware of what information is contained inside of that QR code?
No, I am not.
Okay.
That's a technical issue. But I would suggest to you that
if I can, my understanding is that those QR codes, depending on what precinct you're at, contains information directly related to that precinct. In other words, my friend here and I may live across the street from each other, but if we vote at two different precincts, that his QR code would contain the city councilor or county commissioner that may represent him, and it could be an entirely different person that represents me on the other side of the street that would be contained in my QR code. And that the importance of the QR code, the way it is read, is during the fiasco after the 2020 election, where I was having to travel around my district and explain to people how election fraud did not occur, I had to lean on the QR code fairly heavily to show them that ballots were not printed and voted on in LaGrange and then brought to Columbus and scanned and counted in the precincts. So my concern is are we still capturing that important anti-fraud information that's in the QR code if we're scanning the ballot as opposed to the QR code?
I would say I cannot answer that question, but I believe I have someone who's available who can. If it please the committee, could we ask Mr. Gabe Sterling to join us?
Yes.
Gabe is the Chief Operations Officer for the Secretary of State's office, and we rely on Mr. Sterling for his expertise and knowledge. He's done this for a little while. Can you help me, Mr. Sterling?
I will do my best, sir. And again, I want to say we would like to have had Blake Evans here today. He's our elections director. He knows more about this than I do on the specifics, but he is in a deposition defending SB 202 successfully, we hope, after successful elections in 2022. To answer your question directly, Senator Robertson, the QR code is literally, when we build a ballot, we build it based on ballot combinations. And there are thousands in the state, and say for Fulton, there's thousands in Fulton. And what you do is you build what looks like your hand-marked paper ballot, like you get on an absentee ballot. That is what it looks like. And there's timing marks on all those sides. What it's looking for is, say, Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Donald Trump will be X36, Y32, and it'll be for Joe Biden, X36, Y34. So in the QR code, it's simply looking for that is then correlated to that name as was pre-programmed in the election management system. But you are correct that it is specific to each scanner and specific to each precinct. Now, as you know, precincts can have multiple different things within it. So we have all those ballot styles on there. In the primary, and during early voting, we have all the counties' styles on there at one time. But you are correct. You could not take one and take it to another county unless everything lined up perfectly, which is nigh impossible. I mean, in Jackson County, they have an insane amount because of these fire districts and city councils and school boards and everything else. But you are correct. That is another good security measure that you can't go from county to county. Now, we are not fans of this bill, but I will defend this. We could probably, if you wanted to on the front end, encode that information at the top as a scannable saying, this is ballot combination XYZ. And if the computer sees that it's not that, they'll say, this is not a proper ballot for this thing. So there's ways to take care of it, but there's ways to overcome that. And the QR code is easier to, would be less difficult to duplicate. Sorry, more difficult to duplicate. It's less difficult to duplicate on an OCR, which is what we're talking about here, which is an optical recognition ballot, which is what the senator is proposing.
So it's just a quick follow-up. Are we by changing this to scan the ballot and understand I'm 60 years old, so my tech skills are not where they should be or could be. But when we talk about scanning the ballot, if I go in and scan my ballot, are we talking about basically I have like a photocopy of my ballot that shows how I voted so that I have that to as a record?
You have the ballot that was created.
Right.
This proposal is to scan that document itself using optical character recognition. Now, that technology is available. The challenge is how do we utilize it effectively? We also have the ability to scan marks.
Right.
And certainly I'm looking for a mechanism. The intent, again, is the voter knows that their ballot was accurately counted.
Right.
So I'm open to options that would allow us to do that.
And I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it. Are we sacrificing the scanning of the QR code for this other type of scanning?
I would say we're not sacrificing. I think Mr. Sterling pointed out that the information that's in the QR code could be provided as a supplement, but that would not be the actual vote. That would be the document that says the precinct or the correct county and precinct and the number of
and I guess to rephrase my question, are we capturing in this bill, are we capturing the scan of the ballot and the QR code?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. Because my concern is then, and it's from what we experienced in 2020, I think where we have to determine what's more important. And to me as a voter, when I look at my ballot after I've voted and they're on the screen, I go by and I'm one of those people that check my ballot to make sure that I did everything. I print it off. I get my paper copy. I look at it, go up there and scan it in. And more important to me when I do that is not that I've looked at my ballot. I know everybody that's on there, the people I voted for. What's important to me is that when I shoot my ballot through, that QR code is read. So somebody can't say, well, the precinct at Emmanuel Baptist Church, somebody went up there and dumped a bunch of ballots and we go through this fiasco clown show circus that we all have gone through for the past 3 years.
I understand your concern, Senator, and I appreciate it. I think we can accomplish that, but the challenge we have is, and I want to acknowledge, we had the most successful elections that in my memory anyway, in 2022. We have seen testimony from third parties that indicate that the confidence level is very high, that people are comfortable with the current environment. This bill is to enhance our successes that came from 202, from SB 202. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Malley.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, to the chairman author of this bill, to Mr. Sterling. I don't know if many of my colleagues have gone through a recount, but when I first ran for State House in 2020, I was the first person in the state of Georgia to go through a recount, and it was a hand recount based off of the election machines. We had the Secretary of State's office down in Chatham County. And so my question is based off of a couple things. So you talked about the information being on top of the ballot. If you wanted to verify where someone was voting out of precinct potentially, that's already addressed before a person is allowed to cast a ballot. When you come in to be checked in, they let you know if you can vote in this precinct or not, or if there's an issue, they give you a provisional ballot. Is that not true, Mr. Sterling?
That would be true, but doesn't address Senator Robertson's issue where people believe there's a possibility of quote unquote dumping ballots into a ballot box. That's I think what he's referring to more specifically.
Absolutely. And so further question, at the end of the day, there's a ticker tape that's put on the precinct. And doesn't that tape tell you the number of ballots that have been cast, number of ballots that have been received, and the number of ballots at that particular precinct? And it'll tell you the ballots for the candidates.
The procedure is at the closing of the polling location, depending on the number of tabulators you have, most precincts have one tabulator, some have two, some have three. You were supposed to print off that tape, which shows your zero file at the beginning of the day, showing there were no ballots cast, then a secondary tape showing all the ballots that were cast, the number, and then the outcomes of those in the individual races in that precinct. Yes, sir.
So that would answer the question about dumping of balance, because they have to balance before they leave. They have to balance and pull all this data together to make sure that works. My second question is it relates to the technology on the ballot scanners, because we had to do a hand recount and humans are prone to error. We were there for a week doing a hand recount. And if we didn't have the tabulation to balance back to, humans made a lot of mistakes by counting Mallow, Westbrook. You hear that over and over again. It's like wallpaper. So my question is, with the current scanning devices do we have, if you were to change this text or add it where this legislation says that it will read the text that the elector voted, how would that affect the current technology that we have?
That's a rather broad question, Senator.
Can our tabulators scan the text?
Per Chairman Burns's request, we've started some discussions with Dominion about what their scanners can and cannot do on this front. Their strategy has always been to use the coordinate-based voting, which is what we use, which is used by 98% of the country right now. And their understanding, this is from a half-hour conversation yesterday after the chairman in our office had a discussion for another half an hour, is they are not sure if what we call the scanners at the precincts now could handle that change. There is another secondary scanner that might be able to do it, but we would have to replace all the scanners more than likely. But again, that's a first pass at asking this question. So I can't answer that question thoroughly right now for you, Senator.
So, Mr. Sterling, would it be your opinion that Senate Bill 189 should be delayed until you have the actual factual data, if it could be done with machines we have? Because I'm sure the budget is coming through and there might not be an appropriation for an unknown cost.
I think we should have discussions and review any potential improvements or changes to our system, but do them very soberly and very cautiously.
Right.
So,
Just shouldn't just legislate them without all of the documentation and the forethought, because this could potentially create more issues and distrust in elections because we keep changing things that are working well. Would you agree with that?
I think in all legislation that's passed in any legislature, that there is a law of unintended consequences, because we never know exactly how they're going to be interpreted and dealt with that later on, sir.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, respond to the senator's concerns.
Go right ahead, sir.
This is a hearing, and the objective is the hearing is to put this concept before the committee and really before the public. Whether or not this becomes an action item is at the discretion of the committee.
Right. Thank you. Let's see, Senator Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have two questions. First, my colleague mentioned an election where outside of precinct, you have certain information posted. I think it's about the number of people that voted in that precinct. Is that correct?
At the end of the closing of election, we'll have the number of people who voted and the outcomes on that particular tabulator. We'll have all the election results of that precinct.
So with Senate Bill 202, didn't we change something with that where we have more information that's now provided at the end of the day from precincts?
That's a secondary issue having to do with what we call the denominator rule, which essentially what you're trying to do is we already know how many people early voted by the time we get to election. We know the majority of absentees by then, even though some can still be accepted through election day. And the intent of SB 202 is to have a 10 o'clock deadline for counties to be able to get us how many people voted in each one of the precincts. Now, our office has asked that to be moved to midnight because our counties are focusing so hard on getting that done. They're not actually reporting the results fast enough. So as the unintended consequences we discussed earlier, it's slowing down results getting out. But that is one of the things is getting that denominator in
Right.
place. So everybody knows this is what's out there. There's no more votes beyond that.
Right. And so other question, when it comes to the audits that we have, and also, and maybe it's two different questions, but I'll ask them both at the same time. Also, when it comes to something like a recount, when right now current law says that paper ballot is your ballot, it's my understanding.
Correct.
When we have an audit and we have a recount, are we rescanning those ballots or are we actually counting those by hand?
There are two separate things that you're discussing there. A recount, which is the thing that's triggered at less than 0.5% in the losing candidate can ask for it. That would be a rescan.
Mhm.
The audits, as in all audits, are going to be all using humans reading the text and not reading the scan. Even in the accounting of them afterwards, when we do the stacks, there's always going to be I hate the term human readable text is what's used for all audits, whether it was the full hand retally that we did in 2020 to show that all 5 million ballots were cast properly as they were presented to the machines. And we had an error rate of 0.1053% and a change in the margin by 0.0099%, showing we essentially were dead on accurate. And to Senator Marlowe's point, humans are terrible at counting. So that's why the audits are important, but the tabulators were there and we had to look at history. The reason we have these tabulators is because humans are terrible at counting and it was easy to not easier to steal elections. So we put these computers in place to help mitigate those risks.
And I guess just one comment if I can, and it seems to me if the issue may be for some lack of trust in the scanner itself,
Mhm.
I'm not sure if the bill accomplishes anything, because if you don't trust the scanner, you're still not going to trust the scanner to read your ballot. It seems like the most important part might be the auditing part, where those that may not trust the scanners at least know there's a process in place where we are looking at paper ballots by hand and see if there's any discrepancy there. It's just a thought.
The Secretary's office is in favor of having more audits. In fact, I believe in Senator Burns' cleanup bill, we have increased the number of audits. I'm all for more audits, the better. We have Joseph
Right.
Kirk from Bartow County in the back. I think he audits his breakfast every day. So he runs great audits.
Thank you. Senator Harbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think as we look at this whole thing and thank you, Senator Burns, I think this is especially for a lot of people that look at the QR code and they look at their ballot, they're saying, how do I know that transfer is occurring in a proper format? And I think the issue is what I see is what I vote. People, it's a trust issue. More than anything else, I think that the people have to trust the system. My question is two-pronged. This is what we're doing with in-person voting is we're using a QR code, but yet with absentee ballots, we are not using the QR code because they're marking the ballot and that ballot is being scanned and being counted. Am I correct?
You're actually using essentially the same marking, the same tick marks, what we call them.
Right.
Those are being contained in the QR code, and the scanner is reading a tick mark. I, as a human being, cannot know what that scanner is doing, whether it's a QR code or whether it's a hand marked ballot or a full face ballot printed off a BMD. To Senator Strickland's point, the scanner is programmed. It is programmed by a human being, and even an OCR. You can't know because it's all ones and zeros. If a human being makes a mistake in programming it or does something nefarious as a insider, the same risks are there. I think we have to mitigate the risks and do everything we can to instill confidence, which is why I think the auditing portion, regardless of what you're using, is the most important thing to show the voters that, yes, in fact, your vote did count the way you intended it to be cast.
But if I'm correct, in-person voting and absentee ballot voting are counted on a different methodology. One is a QR code. One is reading the actual ballot using OCR technology.
No, that's incorrect.
Okay.
They're both using coordinate-based voting.
Right. Coordinate. I understand
Okay,
that.
so it's not reading. OCR is going to that point would read like it would read SEN period, then mark it MARTY. It would read that and then transfer it over to the tabulation side, I believe is how Senator Burns intends it.
But there's not a QR code that is created on an absentee ballot. Am I correct?
Correct, sir. But
Okay.
but essentially the QR code is reading with the absentee ballot. Our scanners, I can take an absentee ballot or a QR code ballot and run them through and they would read both because it's using the same technology.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right, we're going, let's see. Senator four.
Sorry.
Senator Hatch.
So the technology already exists. So we can scan without, the ballot counters can scan without needing a QR code.
The technology exists, but it's with a different vendor right now. There's one EAC certified system done by Hart InterCivic that does OCR technology. And the largest jurisdiction it is in Orange County, California. And it's about 1.8 million voters, a lot smaller than Georgia.
I'm saying when I fill out an absentee ballot, I'm in my kitchen, I fill out my ballot. I don't create a QR code, but I send it to the elections office. They run it through a machine and the machine counts it.
That is what's happening, whether it's a QR code or your hand marker ballot. It's reading the same thing. It is reading with a coordinate base that's on that.
Is it?
And I'm not lying, people in the back behind me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is it like on an absentee ballot, do you fill in circles? Is it like a Scantron reader or is it
Yes.
actually reading the text?
It's a Scantron reader. It's reading
Okay.
the coordinate.
That's what I
reading the
was-
coordinate
that's
on
all I
that,
needed.
And the coordinate on it's
And
equated to that in the QR code.
And I think, certainly from my perspective, I'm happy to entertain the option of not using the OCR, but using the marked reader, not a QR reader. Don't use QR codes, read the mark, perhaps not require OCR.
If I'm not mistaken, that's done by a different machine. It's done by the OptiScan, isn't it?
Both machines can read either kind. There's a central scanner that's done, it's a high speed, high capacity scanner, but the polling location scanner and the central scanner can both read either the hand marked, which would be the tick mark ones, or the QR code, which is still equating to the tick marks. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. See, is that Senator Gooch?
Yeah, one quick question. Has there been any documented fraud on these scanners that you know of anywhere in the United States that have been proven to be fraudulent as far as inaccurate reading of the
Okay, there's two different
one,
questions
just
there.
one case?
Okay, inaccurate, there's always gonna be some issues if there's programming problems, but fraud, I would guarantee an intentional fraud, no, sir. There's been no evidence
So
anywhere.
give
in
me
the
an
United States.
example of an inaccuracy.
Um,
How would-
DeKalb County, when there was a misprogramming in the County Commission District 5, that was misread. But we had the paper backup ballots to actually do the counts to get to the proper outcomes from those. But that was a human error of a programming issue, not that the machines do what we tell them to do, basically.
So Senator Harbin, and then we're going to move on to another bill.
I just want to confirm something that's been said to me through people in the election. Is the current paper that was used in the 2022 elections, is it watermarked paper? I was told that it was used as that it is watermarked paper that was purchased from Dominion, and that the watermark is not used unless it is a post-election audit. Is that a true statement?
It's not a watermark, but it's security paper that has ceramic that's put into it from one particular vendor, and it's certified, and it's used for both absentee ballots, emergency ballots, and BMD ballots and provisional ballots. So it's all the same paper for all the ballots. And you have to use a laser wand, and there is a potential to use the scanner itself. You can turn it on to reject anything that's not on that.
What we had is a false ballot that came up, and I sent a letter for Spalding County that it went through, and they were told that not every the wands were not readily available from that standpoint. I don't know whether that's a true statement or not. That's just what I was told. But that the scanner itself has the capacity to read a piece of paper, that it's a security piece of paper, but that's not being used currently. Is that a true
It's
statement?
not turned on standard operating procedure, but every county has been provided the wand. Spalding County, it's had some challenges,
Right.
like some other counties. And we're still in the middle of investigation, so I don't want to get too deep down when we're going to respond to your answer. We
Okay.
would have an answer faster, but as I stated before, Mr. Evans is in a deposition all day today defending SB 202. So we'll get to you as quickly as we can with an answer on that.
But we are using paper that's watermarked or
Security
special,
paper. Mhm.
but we are not checking it through the scanner, and the wands are given to the precincts to be able to use.
The wands are in every single county.
Okay.
Spalding claimed they didn't have one. I have the signed inventory that they did, but we'll
Okay.
work on that as we move forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, committee, for your questions. We, in the sake of time, we need to move ahead to our next bill.
I want to, let me, before Mr. Sterling takes a bit of a break, I want to thank Secretary of State's office. I want to thank Mr. Sterling. I want to thank Mr. Teasley and certainly the secretary. They've been strong partners as we've tried to work through the opportunities to improve our elections. I appreciate them. I appreciate their expertise and their professionalism.
We appreciate the challenges that y'all face every day of getting questions from lots of people from all different sides. And we are trying to work to make sure we continue. We were rated #1 by Heritage for security, rated #1 for access by the Center for Election Innovation Research. We're leading the nation. We have the best system in the country. And I think we are going to be doing it. And we're going to be an example to other parts of the country with what we've been doing with y'all's leadership and help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stern. If I may, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move on to SB 222. That was a quick 10-minute discussion about 189. This will probably be a quick 10-minute discussion about 222. Senate Bill 222 LC 472226. The intent of this bill is to prohibit third parties from funding Georgia elections. In SB 202, there was provisions that restricted third-party funding to election officials. We had a county that chose to accept funds as a commission, and then by way of direct funding from the commission, they sent it to their election officials. So if you would please, this bill, if I'm on line 16 and 17, section 1, the definitions are important. Government employee and person. So government employee is any individual, committee, entity, or group who are members of the state election board or employed by a county or municipal government employee. The person is any individual, proprietorship, firm, joint partnership. You understand that. Now look at line 26, 25 through 27. All costs and expenses related to conducting primaries, elections, runoffs, or other undertakings authorized or required by this chapter shall be paid from lawfully appropriated public funds. So we have to ensure that the funding of our elections come from lawfully appropriated public funds. No county, I'm in line 28, 29, and 30. No county or municipal government employee, or election official shall solicit, take, or otherwise accept from any person a contribution, donation, service, or anything else of value for the purpose of conducting primaries, elections, and in support of performing their duties. I'm on subparagraph D, line 37. Maybe I'll back up just a bit. If you were to accept that, if you're a government employee or an election official who on or after the effective date of this code section has taken or otherwise accepted a contribution from a person, then you will immediately return it to the entity which provided such thing of value. Section line 39 allows us to acknowledge that there are certain nominal donations that are acceptable. For example, the locations, the ability to use a polling location for voting purposes, are services provided without remuneration. I've got some concerns about that. I'm a little concerned about potentially paid volunteers. We may want to look at that carefully. And then goods of nominal value less than $100. I highlight the attention on line 42. The violation of this code section will constitute a felony, and upon conviction, punishable by not less than 1 year and a fine of not less than $10,000. On lines 65 through 70, we've struck a couple of paragraphs. I would like to discuss that and get the insights of the committee. No superintendent shall take or accept any funding, grants, or gifts from any source other than the governing authority of the county or municipality, the state of Georgia, or the federal government. So what we're trying to do is say you can't take funds that are from third parties. I would ask for the committee's input on maybe looking at that sentence, so that those three lines, 65 through 67, and perhaps consider no superintendent shall take or accept any grants or gifts from any source other than the state of Georgia or the federal government. So you can't accept a grant or a gift from anything other than the state, because we would like, in line 68, it was the intent that we would accept support from third parties, but they go through the state election board via the Secretary of State. Well, we can strike that, and this really is it has to be modified, but the state election board, I would propose, or the Secretary of State shall implement a method of accepting donations intended to facilitate the administration of elections and a method for equitable distribution of such donations statewide. Finally, in lines 80 through 82, same concern there. If we modify 65 through 67, we might consider modifying 80 through 82. Mr. Chairman, again, the intent is to prohibit third parties' selective funding of elections, and I will happy to entertain questions.
Any member have any questions? Let's see, number 13. Sir, Senator Strickland.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Chairman Burns, looking at 68 through 70, there's reference to a report that would be provided about October 1st, 2021. Was that ever provided to us?
Very late. The state election board was unable to meet the deadline that was specified in SB 202. But and I'll be candid and say I have not received it, but it is my understanding that the state election board did provide those process methods and procedures. So we should have a way to accept potential donations, but my intent is that any donations go through the state election board via the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State then distribute those funds equitably across the state and not selectively in a particular geographical area.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Let's see. Number 2, let's see, Senator Gooch.
Yep, just a quick question. If I'm reading this correctly, Senator, you're striking that language that requires the report? Did you put it somewhere else?
The report was already required,
Mhm.
and it was due last, I believe, November.
But
So-
in this bill, are you gonna strike that report?
I would say we would, you're looking at line 68 through 70, is that
Yes,
correct?
Correct.
Okay. My suggestion or proposal would be to have the state election board implement their proposed method of accepting. So the instruction in 202 was to propose a method of accepting donations and then develop a method of equitable distribution. We would remove the requirement to study and report
Mhm.
and change that to implement.
Gotcha. I would try to keep the transparency part of it as much as possible, regardless of whose party's in control down here. The other side never trusts one another.
Agreed.
So I think the more transparency we have on these private funders, the better off the entire state is. So
Right.
whatever we can do to increase that, I think it would be better off.
Now,
Thank you.
if it is the committee's pleasure, I mean, we could look at code that would eliminate any third-party donations to the state of Georgia for elections, but perhaps we would want to accept those if they were willing to work within the guidelines of the state election board and the Secretary of State's office.
Just following up on that, I would feel better personally about that myself. If we're going to take it, we need to have some strict guidelines on how that money gets spent. So-
Agree.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on those same lines, Chairman Burns, I'm reading this to say that the election board was to study and report to the General Assembly a
Correct.
proposed method for accepting donations. And maybe I misunderstood, but I understood your remarks to suggest that it was the election board that would determine the method for accepting and how they would be used.
That is correct. So.
But excuse me, but is it not the General Assembly, or the intent of this language? It was the General Assembly that would receive and determine the appropriate method moving forward. So my concern is that if we strike this in toto, that the election board would have that authority and determination without any oversight from the General Assembly. So I would suggest you maybe moving forward, the General Assembly ought to continue to have some responsibility in determining the method of how those funds might be used and the methodology in which they're deployed.
I would be happy to take the senator's counsel and make some adjustments in the language to ensure that the General Assembly continues to have oversight of any donations received through the Secretary of State.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions. You want to have any closing comments on this bill?
No, my only closing comments is to say, we're trying to ensure that every county follows Georgia law. And SB 202, I thought was clear about third-party donations. And it appears that that was not an accurate perception. So this is an attempt to ensure that we clearly delineate between acceptable and unacceptable third-party contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good news is, I think, is Senator Beach here?
Yes, sir. He's here.
Look, great. I'm happy to introduce Senator Brandon Beach to present to you SB 229.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is my first time in front of ethics. But I appreciate you having me. Basically, what I'm doing is amending Chapter 2 of Title 21, and the whole bill is in lines 10 through 13. And basically what it is if you're going to work an election and tabulate votes, you need to be a citizen of the United States. This is an issue that in Fulton County, we had a person that was a citizen of Nigeria that was tabulating and counting our votes. And I want to make sure that we have a U.S. citizen doing that. With that, that's all this bill does, that they need to be a resident of the United States.
And we're working off LC 472084.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Senator Gooch.
Yes, sir. I wondered if the author would explain on line 11, how do you define an intelligent citizen? Is there a parameter by which you use? But I'd like to use that when I get home this week.
Steve Gooch, intelligent.
That worries me too. But no, seriously, is that something the lawyers and Ledge Council came up with?
That's what Ledge Council came up with: judicious, intelligent, and an upright citizen of the United States.
How about good looking? Would that be?
Well, you would not be working elections.
Thank you.
Oh. Let's say Senator Robertson.
Senator Beach, you said something there at the end. You said to ensure that the individual is a resident. You can be a resident without being a citizen.
Well,
is your focus?
No,
I just wanted to.
I misspoke.
That's fine.
Citizen. It's real clear in line 12.
Right.
A citizen of the United States.
I just want to be very
So,
clear. What we're
yes.
looking for is
Thank you for correcting me.
thank you. My in-laws who immigrated here from Mexico are citizens. And so they would be allowed to work. Well, what you're talking about are individuals who are here that are not citizens. Is that
This
correct?
individual that tabulated votes in Fulton County was a citizen of Nigeria. We wouldn't be able to go to Italy and count their votes. I don't think they would have let a citizen from the U.S. go count their votes in another country. We shouldn't allow it here.
Thank you.
See, Senator Mara.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. To the gentleman from my chairman of economic development, I just have a couple questions as it relates to the persons employed or retained by county election superintendent to undertake any election-related duties arising from this chapter shall be a judicious, intelligent, and upright citizen of the United States. Is it not true, Mr. Chairman, that these requirements for judicious and intelligent and upright, they don't apply to the Georgia General Assembly? And we, by virtue, are passing laws, and I would ask the author, would you agree that not all members of the General Assembly are judicious, intelligent, and upright?
The senator knows of what he speaks.
So we add some tougher requirements to handle elections, but the people who actually vote on the laws pertaining to elections don't necessarily have the same qualifications.
Elections are very important. We need to have good people running our elections, and they need to be citizens of the U.S.
Thank you. Let's see, Senator Four. Thatcher.
So I know we've made several jokes about this, but in all seriousness, judicious, intelligent, and upright, is that defined in the code section right now? Is that going to be enforceable?
I will
Council
get,
weigh in on this?
is Ledge Council?
Yeah.
If I must.
Three.
So the language that everyone keeps quoting, judicious, intelligent, upright citizen of the United States, this code language is already on the books. It's a requirement for the selection of poll managers and poll workers. This language just applies it to all personnel of the elections office working on election matters. So it's on the books. It's been on the books for decades. So it's not a new standard that this bill is creating. It's just carrying it over to a new class of people.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Senator Beach, thank you very much
Thank
for
you for
being here
hearing.
and doing your presentation this morning.
I
Thank you,
would
sir.
appreciate your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going on to, how
221.
about 221, Senator Burns?
221. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're moving right along. And this is a requested cleanup legislation from the Secretary of State's office. And they're mostly editorial, but I would call the committee's attention to lines 55 through 62. This is the language when entities send out applications for absentee ballots. There's been some confusion there. We note we strike lines 55 through 58 and replace them with lines 59 through 62. It's essentially the same wording. I would only acknowledge the fact that the end of the component is "this is not a ballot" is highlighted and nothing else changes there. Simple editorial changes in 66 and 68. Where it says from to be contained or to be contained to just the word contain and be printed to printed. I would like to acknowledge that section 2, lines 70 through 98, at the request of the Secretary of State, we will remove that language from the bill. It was an attempt to clarify early voting, Saturday early voting. If you recall, we had a situation in the runoff election in December that the Saturday early voting day happened to fall on the Saturday after a holiday. And there had to be some judicial intervention to make sure that we could address that. We still want to address that, and the Secretary of State is working on that. But the good news is we have time to craft language that would appropriately address that issue. So we'll remove section 2 in its entirety. On line 103, if you remember, Mr. Sterling pointed out that they needed some additional time to provide necessary information. Right now in 202, it's set at 10 p.m. This would move it to 11:59 p.m. It's the only change there. And I would suggest that we do a very small change on line 122 because we want to be consistent. And I'd ask the Secretary of State's indulgence there, where on line 22, it says pre-certification tabulation audits. Typically, they're referred to as risk limiting audits. So we would change that to risk limiting audit. And if you'll notice on line 134, we use the term risk limiting audit. And you'll notice on line 13, we add both primaries and general elections. And I acknowledge the fact that Mr. Kirk is here, who's an election official in Bartow County. He's been very, very supportive and helpful to the author and to the Secretary of State. And he's certainly been an asset to us. And I appreciate that. At the end of the day, if you look in lines 152 to 160, current proposal is that we strike the 10% requirement, 10% requirement of one or more counties. We probably want to look a little bit further at that. I would say I need to have more discussions about whether or not that is something we want to completely strike, because the date there was the code section assembly conducted beginning not later than November 1/24. And then finally, in section 5, we had a municipality who was whose duty was to call an election, and they did not. They chose to ignore the requirement to call an election, and we found that there was no penalty for that. So section 5 is a requirement that any county or municipal election superintendent to whom a duty to call an election is laid by a local act of the General Assembly, who willfully neglects or refuses to perform his or her duties to call, I would insert the words to call an election, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. So basically, Mr. Chairman, this is a cleanup bill at the request of the Secretary of State, staff, and Ledge Council.
Thank you. See, Senator Mallett.
I'm back.
I'm back.
Chairman Burns, I have a couple questions for you, especially on line 164.
Sure.
It says any county or municipal election superintendent on whom a duty to call an election is laid by a local act of the General Assembly who willfully neglects or refuses to perform his or her duty shall be guilty of a misdemeanor.
Right.
My concern in this section is as relates to the previous presidential election. It was not my local election superintendent that was called. It was the Georgia Secretary of State that was asked to find 11,000 votes. Why not include the state official? Because they certify elections. Are they independent? They have to follow the laws of the General Assembly.
I appreciate the senator's question. The intent of this adjustment is to ensure that local election boards and local counties and cities actually conduct the elections that are prescribed.
Further follow-up question. So how do we address the state election board? Are they autonomous without having regulation by the Georgia General Assembly? Do they not get held to the same standards as our localities?
The state election board is an appointed body, and membership is controlled by both the legislature, both houses, the House and the Senate, and the chair is appointed through the governor's office.
So should they not be held accountable for violating the law? What's good for some is good for all.
I would ask the secretary to elaborate on where the state election board has violated the law.
Again, thankful to the Secretary of State who did not violate the law, but with enough pressure from folks to say not to do something, he recorded a conversation because he felt that it was illegal, had to defend himself. He went on tour throughout the state to defend the state elections. He was under great threats and harassment. Mr. Sterling received threats, had to have law enforcement in front of his home for folks who did not believe in the outcome of the election. And so if you're facing life or death and someone's threatening you, you may not want to certify, but I think the criminal penalty is what we talk about in this General Assembly as a deterrent. So I feel that the deterrent should be a criminal penalty.
I would be happy to entertain the senator's suggestions if he wishes to put it in the form of an amendment. However, this is a hearing only for today, and I would ask that we take that under consideration when we proceed with action.
Thank you. Any other member have any questions? Thank you very much. We'll move on to Senate Bill 122.
122.
Senator
Senator
Kirkpatrick.
Kirkpatrick. We're making progress, gang. Last bill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you for being here this morning, bright and early.
Absolutely. The origin of this bill was actually from a House bill. And some of you may remember House Bill 1464 that came over last session very late on day 40 and did not cross the finish line. I committed to several of my constituents that I would draft a bill to address ballot transparency and chain of custody that were in that bill. And that's what's in this bill, Senate Bill 122. Since that time, I've been meeting with various stakeholders, including local election officials, and it appears that a few changes might be beneficial. And with that, Chairman Burns is going to walk us through the sections. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. As the senator pointed out, this legislation has been vetted before, both in the House and in the Senate, and in this committee last year. It is, I would best describe it as House Bill 1464 light. It does not contain all of the provisions of HB 1464, but it contains some of those. And I'd like to quickly walk you through the significance of this legislation. First of all, in Section 1, Section 1 allows for the formation of a independent review board, a performance review of a local election. And if you notice on lines 28, 29 through 31, I guess 32, the state election board shall appoint 3 competent persons to serve as members of the performance review board, one of whom shall be an employee of the elections division of the Secretary of State, and 2 shall be local election officials. We added the terminology or members of a county board of elections or county board of elections and registration. The reason for that was just to allow for some flexibility in forming the performance review board. In practice, the state election board has interpreted this to allow them to do that, and we're codifying it. Section 2 deals with ballot security. I will point you to lines 39 through 47. Ballots must be securely stored and protected from unauthorized access. You have to have access to a secure space. So we're defining it as a space, and we're restricting who is allowed to access that space, including EMS and building maintenance and those types of things. I think on line 46 and 47, there'll be some adjustments just because emergency personnel shall have access to the space, not necessarily a room. It could be a steel box or container in which ballots are located. And the terminology election management system really is an older term. And then I finally point out lines 53 through 57. When unvoted blank ballots are transported to and from precincts, the ballots shall be securely stored in a sealed container, which are accompanied by a ballot transfer form signed by at least 2 individuals. This is a chain of custody requirement for blank ballots. We'll look quickly at sections 3 and 4. They're basically identical, one dealing with primaries and the other dealing with general elections. The significance of this section is that there are 4 copies of the consolidated return of the primary or the general election in section 4 to be certified by the superintendent on forms furnished by the Secretary of State. You'll notice that 1 copy on line 67 is in the office of the election superintendent. It is an open record. Number 2, 1 copy filed in the superintendent's office. It is an open record. Number 3 on line 70 is a copy forwarded to the Secretary of State with a copy of each precinct return. It is an open record. Line 73, number 4, 1 copy to be sealed with the clerk of the Superior Court. Now, that has become the issue, the sealing of that particular document or documents. So the original bill, so 1464, struck the word sealed and filed. And in discussions with the Secretary of State and in discussions with the election officials and ACCG, candidly, it might be prudent that we allow the fourth copy to remain sealed in case there is some discrepancy, and it can only be accessed through the Superior Court. So it would likely be appropriate to strike sections 3 and 4 so that can be remained, that one copy can be remained sealed. Remember, there are 4 copies, 3 of them are open of the consolidated report, correct, of the consolidated, not the ballots. We'll talk about the ballots in a minute. Moving to section 5. This is the voting ballots themselves, delivery of voting materials, presentation of grand jury, in certain cases, preservation. If you'll notice on line 142, the word hold is changed to retain and preserve. You'll notice that at 43 must be retained for 24 months, and the key is under seal unless otherwise directed by a Superior Court judge. But we replace that in a manner so as to prevent ballots or other documents from being altered, amended, damaged, modified, or mutilated. And in 47, line 147 shall be retained and preserved. You'll see similar language there. In lines 150 through 53 is the key component of this legislation. It provides for, upon certification of all matters on the ballot in a particular election, all such documents for such election shall be subject to electronic inspection pursuant to Code 21-272, provided that such electronic documents are high-resolution images of no less than, name that pixel level, right? Right now, it's at 300. We think that perhaps it should be a higher resolution. We've got to look at cost and capacity before we move beyond 300. Line 171, retained and preserved, we strike under seal, and it cannot be destroyed unless otherwise provided. Now, I would tell you on 172, I've got some concerns because the language that was provided says by order of the mayor or council. That is probably something we have to take a look at. But at the end of the day, the objective of this legislation is to secure ballots, provide a chain of custody, and to define retention and preservation. I'll be
Okay,
happy to entertain questions.
all right. Senator Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, to the author of this bill. My question is to both authors. Have you all worked with the senator from the 19th to discuss the appropriations that the state will need to make to local counties for creating unfunded mandates that talk about the storage and the access of facilities? Because in the construction of warehouses to keep all of these items secure, my concern is who's going to pay for this? Are you going to legislate this? How does the smaller counties afford this, who don't have the bandwidth or wherewithal to absorb some of these costs? Are we going to appropriate funds to make this happen?
In response to the senator's question, I think the challenge we have right now is we're already storing exactly what is there. So this does not add any additional physical storage requirements. It doesn't add any additional physical storage requirements. It could add and likely would add additional electronic storage requirements. It depends upon the image resolution that we finally agree on. I will also acknowledge the fact that this space is cheap and it gets cheaper every year. And I would suggest that the ability to store images is more, especially images that are fully and totally available to the public. So any citizen should have access to every ballot image. Now, that ballot image, we'd be happy to add the audit requirement that said you've got to be able to compare and make sure that the ballot images indeed reflect the physical ballots. but we need to protect the physical ballots in case of additional concerns. I would say that this bill does not increase the physical storage requirements. It could and likely would increase the electronic storage requirement.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just direct you to line 39, where you talked about in this chapter, and securely stored and protected from unauthorized access to the secure space. When you use the language of a secure space, that's a space that's controlled, not accessible by the general public. And you give definitions as to who would have access to this space. And you just said a moment ago that you would want the general public to have access to that space, to the electronic
image,
to the electronic image.
the physical space.
Got you. So if this space does not currently exist, if you're going to restrict the people that have access, wouldn't that mean we need a new facility to make it secure?
It exists, Senator. It currently exists. So that the space, by the way, it could be a room, it could be a building, it could be a sealed box, it could be a container. It could, that all of that is at the discretion of the local election officials. So they already have to do this, Senator. This is not a new requirement. It's simply codifying that you control the space appropriately and limit physical access to authorized personnel.
But to my point, you said it's already being done
It is.
and it's already happening and it's already in place. So my question is,
The physical space is already in place.
it's already in place. And if you come into a government building and you're unauthorized and not an official employee of a county, you usually have to show some credentials to get in the facility. And so what I'm asking is, with the further definitions provided in this bill, my question will be, when we had the recounts and everybody wanted to see the votes being counted, well, they were in the facility that would be a secured government facility and they were the general public.
But they would be authorized and they would be observers, Senator.
Authorized.
They would be observers.
So
for a potential recount.
if the intent is to preserve security, anybody can authorize anybody to just come in. I mean, how do we ensure the security that you're talking about if the elections person can then authorize someone? I mean, it's like my sheriff deputizing me to be a deputy. You see what I'm saying?
I understand your concern. I don't see how it rises to a level of changing the request that has been made in SB 222. I think the intent is to secure the ballots and to control the chain of custody and to also provide full access. And the full access is via a high resolution digital image so that the physical ballots remain under the control of the clerk of courts or whoever is responsible for maintaining the physical ballots themselves.
So again, Mr. Chairman, when you talk about the change in the resolution, you're going to need a better scanner to scan that. That's going to be technology. Those are going to have to be stored. Those are going to have to be, how are you going to scan all that? Have you seen the ballot scanners? Those are huge things. I mean, if you look at the copiers we have in the General Assembly, those are big machines to scan a document at this DPI. Who's going to pay for that?
We are certainly concerned about the potential of cost of scanning. We want to avoid rescanning, but we would like to think that when you scan your ballot for the tabulation, you capture the image at that time.
And that is already done under SB 202.
That's right.
That's true. The challenge we have is the resolution.
Could it,
Not all, we're not getting as high a quality resolution of the ballot as we would like. So we need to allow for any citizen to access the images of the ballots at a resolution where they can understand the marks and understand the intent.
to understand the marks and the intent?
The intent of the ballot. What did the elector, how did the electors vote? They can see it. They can't see who it was, but they can see on that ballot how that voted. So in your case, where you got into a runoff, every ballot cast would be available to you electronically so that you could validate that every vote for yourself and your opponent were counted correctly.
Absolutely. So would a further higher resolution of a ballot being published online with the markings on the side, would you believe that that would increase the ability of someone looking to initiate fraud because they had the higher resolution to maybe extrapolate the data that was embedded and encoded in that for security reasons?
You'll notice that this is available after certification. So if they found a potential problem, they would have to go through the process, of challenge the election and requesting an appropriate review.
All right, moving on. You want to do a
Oh,
any
are we
kind
good?
of close up?
I think so. If you don't mind, I'll join you back up there and we'll allow for folks to. share some
Okay.
input. I'd like to thank Chairman Williams for handling the discussion that we've dealt with this morning. We've had 5 bills. There's a lot of information out there. What we'd like to do now in the essence of time, we've got a few more minutes. We want to accept input from those in the room. We have a sign-up sheet. Let me just make sure you understand, no action today, no voting on any activity today. We will have a meeting on Monday, the 27th of February at 5 p.m. in this room. In this room. And any of the bills that we have discussed today could be considered for action next week. So let me start with, we've already had Mr. Sterling. What we'll do is a couple of minutes, please, of input. Marcy McCarthy. Marcy.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
My name is Marcy McCarthy, and I'm the chairman of the DeKalb Republican Party.
If you would just give me 1 second, Mrs.
Sure.
McCarthy. But in the essence of time, if you could limit your comments to 2 minutes, and then we'll move forward. Thank you.
We need to amend SB 202 and close the Zuckerbucks loophole in sections OGGA 21-271 and OGGA 21-2212. Our Election Integrity Task Force has suggested language which has been included in SB 222. Here's why. In 2021, the General Assembly passed wide-ranging election reform legislation known as the Election Integrity Act of 2021. This law addresses various issues that has arisen in the 2020 elections. One principal issue was to prohibit the funding of county government election operations by private groups and organizations. Appropriately, I am here in front of the Senate Committee on Ethics to tell you that high-ranking employees of DeKalb County and its Democrat Party appointed chairwoman of the election board have conspired to intentionally violate the Election Integrity Act of 2021. At its January 27th, 2023 meeting, in a gleeful tone, boasted that the DeKalb County Board of Registration Elections announced that it had been awarded a $2 million grant from the U.S. Alliance for Election Excellence. As evidence that this is a highly partisan exercise, that the Republican appointees to the DeKalb BRE had no knowledge of this grant. In fact, DeKalb County Board of Elections Chair Loman Smith brazenly stated, "I'm excited about this. It's kind of a nerdy big deal. Since election offices are not allowed to receive grants directly, the lengthy application process was led by the county's finance department." Indeed, it was. In May of 2022, Preston Stevens, Deputy Chief Financial Officer for DeKalb County, completed the U.S. Alliance for Election Excellence application. In the application, it is asked, are there ways to state elections division could better support election offices with additional resources? Mr. Preston writes, I suspect so, but I'll defer this to the VRE director.
Thank you for your.
Thank
input.
you.
You're welcome to provide written testimony. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
I would suggest that if you agree or disagree with any of the bills, that you would state that clearly. Ms. McCarthy, are you opposed or are you in favor of
Sorry.
a particular piece of legislation?
I am very much in favor of SB 222.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Ms. Jerry Jones, Mr. Jones? One minute, please. I apologize.
Understood, sir. Wanted to say thank you, first of all, to all of you who've worked on election integrity. I know that's a really contentious tightrope to walk and you're pissing a lot of people off regardless of what you do. But I just wanted to say that we are really concerned, as Marcy had just mentioned, about third-party influences in elections. And I think that really what we're trying to aim for here is so that we have transparency, so that people believe that there's not preferential funding to one area as opposed to another. As Senator Mallow had said earlier, certain counties that are smaller don't have the bandwidth that larger counties do. And we just want to make sure that for this SB 221, I believe, 222, my apologies, that when we have funding coming in, we want it to be from the federal government or the state government, just so we can understand that it's being appropriately and equitably divided between counties so that we don't have any more, unnecessary controversy that gives everybody a headache. And I think that's public trust is what we're trying to aim for here. And I just wanted to say, that's why I'm in support of this bill. And I think it should be under the consideration for the committee. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your input. We appreciate that. Lana? Help me with your name, I apologize. Lana? If you would, for the record, state your name and your affiliation.
Yeah, my name is Lana Goitia Paz. I am the Georgia campaign manager for All Voting is Local. We are a nonpartisan organization whose mission is to advocate for policies and legislative priorities that expand voter access. We are concerned about SB 222 and the impact it will have on counties' ability to efficiently and effectively run elections in Georgia. This bill outright bans all funding that is not publicly allocated for elections. We know in 2020, grant funding provided election-saving resources for counties in the midst of a global pandemic. Instead of championing the resources that saved election offices across the state, this bill aims to needlessly rid us of financial resources that counties otherwise would not have. Elections are costly, and state funding for elections on the county level is very scarce in the state. As the cost of elections continues to grow, largely due to unfunded mandates by this body, it is crucial that we do not cut off lifelines to our election officials. Under SB 202, about a bill this body passed in 2021, there are measures in place to allow outside funding while maintaining guardrails and allowing voters to hold their county commissioners accountable. We encourage this body to continue to allow this essential avenue of funding and to provide necessary resources for our state. Second, if this bill is passed, this bill poses a deeply troubling and extreme penalty for election officials. Lines 42 through 44 outline that a violation of this code section constitutes a felony. This punishment does not fit the so-called crime. This bill seeks to criminalize our election officials for accepting funds that the state and their counties are not providing, funds that only help election administration and not harm. And in a time where counties are struggling to hire election staff, we should be encouraging and incentivizing hardworking Georgians to be a part of the election process, not creating egregious penalties that dissuade people from working in these crucial roles. We encourage this committee to think about the long-term effects of this bill. Thank you.
Stephanie, Sally?
Thank you, Senator. My name is Stephanie Ali. I'm the policy director at New Georgia Project Action Fund. We are a voter registration and engagement organization who've registered over 500,000 people in our time, and just last year alone knocked over 1 million doors to turn out people to vote. So first, I just want to say I had come up here to talk about 221, but I'm very thankful that the Saturday provision has been taken out and hope that remains. So thank you, Senator, for letting us know that. I want to add on to what Ms. Goitia Paz just said around SB 222 and the provisions that would block additional funding for our counties, specifically to focus in on the in-kind mandate that so far blocks anything above $100 outside of the in-kind support for polling locations. Currently under SB 202, it allows counties to, by choice, hand out water for people waiting in line, a provision that, no longer is allowed for outside entities to provide food and water. Keeping in mind that a lot of organizations, a lot of independent people in the community have taken it on to bring food to poll workers, to bring cases of water to the county and to the poll workers to be able to pass out on their own. And it's very easy to bring food to poll workers. That quickly adds up over $100, especially in today's atmosphere of the economy. So I would say that this body should reconsider that in-kind donation amount, especially in lieu of the fact that things like handing out food, handing out water are no longer allowed, and that a lot of this in-kind donation is focused on supporting our poll workers. We oppose the bill SB 222 in its entirety for many of the reasons Ms. Goitiapaz just laid out, but I wanted to especially focus on that in-kind section. Thank you, sir.
All right, hold on just a second. I have a question. Brief question, please, Mr. Mallow.
Just to ask the chair, I think some of my elections folks were trying to get on Zoom, and I don't know if they'd be given an opportunity. They too have to go to work.
We have a Zoom sign-up sheet as well as a in-person sign-up sheet. I'm providing preference to the in-person right now, but we'll do our best to accommodate electronic momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Battles, Cindy Battles.
Actually, I'm gonna close this, so I don't. Chair, it's gonna surprise you to know I had something to say about all 5 of those bills, but I am going to focus on 189 because I have 2 minutes. I'm hoping we get more chance to talk more in depth about the rest of these. I feel it. Oh, by the way, my name is Cindy Battles and I'm with the People's Agenda, just in case anyone forgot. I kind of love this because back in 2019, when we were looking at the Dominion contract and we saw this barcode situation, and progressive voting groups were like, oh, we don't know about the barcode, that feels a little insecure. We were told we were being silly. So if anyone wants to pat me on the back after this meeting and tell me I was right, I appreciate it. What I am kind of concerned about right now, though, is how we are going to accomplish what this bill wants to accomplish. The way I see it, you've got 3 different ways. First of all, the way I understood the Dominion contract, and I hate that Mr. Sterling had to leave, Dominion was planning on having software that would read the text of the ballot and not the barcode. And I had conversations with Chris Harvey in Decatur County that said that that was going to be available in 2020, but that they weren't going to train election supervisors twice, so we'd have it for 2022. That software is not ready and it has not been certified. So unless we're going to force Dominion or force the federal government to certify the software, that would be option 1. Option 2 is we're going to buy new voting machines and new software, which is going to be very expensive. Option 3 is we're going to make election officials hand count every single ballot, which according to this body is an insecure way of doing it because people are terrible at counting. So this bill wants to do something without a solution. And I understand that this is hearing only. We're not going to take action right now, but that's my problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're struggling with opportunities. Miss Christine Neighbors. Ms. Neighbors.
My name is Kristen Neighbors. I'm the State Director for All Voting is Local and All Voting is Local Action. We're a nonpartisan organization that advocates for policies to improve voter access and aid counties in running smooth and fair elections. I'm here to raise a serious concern we have about SB 122. There are several lines, as discussed earlier, that mention removing the seals on ballots. Electronic copies of the ballots are already available after certification. That should be sufficient for all. Removing the seals, opening up the actual ballots for additional inspection could mean we're signing Georgia up for these endless bad faith reviews that we've seen in other states by election deniers who just want to sow distrust in our elections process. We are in favor of fair and open audits, but these are sham audits that are also expensive and they undermine all the great work of our state and local election officials. Election deniers will never be satisfied. Unsealing the ballots aren't going to do it. They're just going to keep pushing to perpetuate conspiracy theories in the name of greater transparency. So I urge you to keep our ballots under seal because enough is enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For clarification, you are referring to what bill, please?
122.
That's not a bill that we're considering. It's not even this committee. What bill do you refer to? What?
I thought I made a huge mistake. Yes, sorry.
122?
Yes, sir. Removing the seals on the ballots.
That's mine. Is it?
It's removing the seals on the ballots.
But
Sorry, I
that's
believe
two,
it's section
221. 122.
122.
Thank you for clarification. Thank you. My apologies.
That's okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Boland, Julie Boland. Oh, I'm sorry. Case.
Good morning.
122.
I'm Julie Boland. I'm a board member for the League of Women Voters of Georgia.
If you would speak a little louder,
Okay.
please, and into the microphone. Thank you, Ms. Boland.
So I'm Julie Boland. I'm a board member with the League of Women Voters of Georgia. We're a nonpartisan group with over 500 members and 12 local leagues across the state. And we were originally concerned about Section 2 of SB 221 that removed Saturday voting after Thanksgiving. I know that has been removed, but we did want to express our concern about it because I know things can come back sometimes or maybe pop up in a different bill. So the League of Women Voters opposes any effort to limit early voting during the established early voting period. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Herring, Ann Gray Herring, Common Cause. And then up next will be Pam Reardon. Ms. Reardon, be prepared.
Good morning. My name is Ann Gray Herring. I'm the policy analyst for Common Cause Georgia. We're a nonpartisan organization that works to support democracy in Georgia, and we're actively engaged in elections and election administration across the state. I want to address some concerns with SB 122, and in the interest of time, we'll keep my comments just to Section 5 of that bill, and specifically lines 150 to 153, stating that upon certification, all matters on the ballot in a particular election, all such documents from such election shall be subject to electronic inspection pursuant to Code Section 21-272. That code section reads that this type of public inspection shall only be in the presence of a custodian or her employee and shall be subject to proper regulation. This would require a substantial amount of time of county employees, specifically in the clerk's office. And I just think more consideration should be given to the real risks of these officials facing an unmanageable quantity of review requests, including those made in bad faith, and the limits of the time and resources of county officials. There should also be more consideration and clarification about what is meant by all documents. That, again, because these requests could become unmanageable, I think it's advisable to define which documents we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Ms. Reardon. And then Mr. Raul.
Good.
Carbado, after you, Ms. Reardon.
Good morning. I'm with, I've done thousands and thousands and thousands, Pamela Reardon, sorry, of poll watching, even before 2020, it goes back to 2008. Yes, we did poll watching then. I distinctly remember that. So I'm going to talk a few comments about Bill 222. Just to clarify, the state board, when they implemented their method for equitable distribution, it was probably late because they have no budget. So there's a small itty bitty amount that was brought forth by SOS for this budget, but they need millions of dollars for the things that they do. So in order to have that transparency and for them to do their job, that's what they need. And also just to clarify, the General Assembly is not in session all the time. So, you know, they can't be, they could, but I don't know how, but they're not brought into these problems. Judge Duffy was appointed, by the way, by Governor Kemp, and he only took the position because he said we got to have a budget. They still don't have a budget. And just to remind you, in Senate Bill 202, that position has to be voted on by the General Assembly. And as far as I know, y'all haven't done that yet. So you may want to get doing that this session. On the expense of the elections that Mr. Representative Manley, Senator brought up, all we need to do is shorten the advanced voting. And in my county, in Cobb County, they insist on 7 till 7 every day for 3 and some weeks. And that could be shortened, because when we had the runoff, let me tell you, the numbers of people that voted advanced voting in the runoff were the same almost as the people that voted in the 3 weeks. 15 seconds. Okay. 221. You glanced over the most important part of this bill is who can apply for an application for an absentee ballot. Having been last year over the vulnerable voters in our state, I have seen workers come in and in handfuls get applications to take back to the memory care units. They should not be voting. So I think in this section, put in some verbiage. Okay, thank you.
Asking some time, we'll accept one more bit of testimony, and then we'll resume input on Monday. Raul, help me with your last name, sir. Geronimo. Great, thanks.
Good morning. My name is Rahul Garabadu, and I'm the Senior Voting Rights Staff Attorney at the ACLU of Georgia. I want to talk about 2 bills in particular today, but first I would just want to remind this committee that we have put elections administrators through the ringer over the last 2 election cycles. In 2020, it was COVID requirements, and then the implementation of new voting machines. 2022, it was implementing a 100-page bill called SB 202 and redistricting. And now we're looking at a third likely high turnout election where there are new requirements being considered right now. So first, with respect to SB 122, I want to talk about Section 5 in particular that opens ballots up for electronic inspection. That is going to create a lot more processes, paperwork, and people power that election administrators just don't have right now. So we need to be very, very careful when we are adding requirements based on ideas of voter confidence that serve as kind of a bottomless pit that can never really be satisfied. SB 189 is the bill about the optical scanner requirements. I want to point to a comment that Mr. Sterling made in his testimony this morning that machines will do what we tell them to do. And we have no indications that the machines have gone rogue in any way. And so, again, we are feeding into these election conspiracy theories, and it's all coming at the expense of the time and energy of elections administrators. So we really need to be cognizant of that when considering these bills. And for the record, we oppose both SB 122 and SB 189. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I regret that we've run out of time this morning. We've had an hour and a half discussion. I know what I wanted to accomplish today was to put on the table everything that could be acted on before we move to the crossover week. So I'd like to thank those of you who are here. I'd like to thank those who are online. We have a number of people online, and I regret that we were not able to get to their input this morning. We will reconvene the committee on Monday, the 27th at 5 p.m. in this room, and we will do our best. Now that we have everything on the table, we will be in a position to perhaps take action, but certainly to take additional input. Thank you. We've been moved. This meeting will be at Monday, the 27th, 5 p.m. in 450 in the Capitol, not in this room, because we've got some challenges in just getting meeting rooms. Chair recognizes Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the meeting on Monday, if it would be helpful, I would like to ask the authors and sponsors of these bills that have funding correlated matters to have some sort of a fiscal note. And to also maybe ask the chairman of appropriations to come and testify that if elections are so important, why are we not appropriating them in the General Assembly to fund them?
Thank you for your input. I'll be happy to have a discussion, and I agree with you on the fiscal note. Any further business before the committee? Hearing none, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.